Helen had always loved her mornings. At 76, the quiet hours before sunrise were her sanctuary. She would sit by the window with her cup of chamomile tea, listening to the world waking up, slowly, gently, like her breath on cold glass. But lately, those mornings had lost their peace. They began with pain. Her legs would ache before her feet even hit the floor. Sometimes it was a dull stiffness, sometimes sharp cramps that twisted her calves and left her gasping for air in the dark. Nights were worse. Waking suddenly, her muscles seizing without warning, her cries swallowed by the silence of her empty room. Helen had blamed everything she could think of: her age, her mattress, even the weather. She tried warm baths, stretching before bed, rubbing menthol cream into her skin, but nothing seemed to stop the nightly torture that left her exhausted, afraid to fall asleep. "I guess this is just what aging looks like," she had whispered to herself more than once. But one morning, after yet another sleepless night, Helen sat at her kitchen table and looked not at the pain, but at her plate. A slice of toast, a cup of tea, and nothing else. She realized something no doctor had said, no brochure had mentioned. What if the cure wasn't in a bottle, but in her kitchen? This is the story of how Helen changed her life. Not with medication, not with therapy, but with food. Not just any food, but the right food. Food that nourished her muscles, calmed her nerves, and brought her peace at night. A banana, a handful of spinach, a glass of milk, a bowl of sweet watermelon. Each bite became a step toward healing, toward walking freely again, toward laughing without fear of pain. This isn't just a story about cramps. It's about listening to your body. It's about learning, at any age, that change is still possible. And it's about hope. Because when Helen took back her health, she also took back her life. Chapter 1. The Power of Potassium. It began with a banana. Simple, unassuming, something Helen had seen 1,000 times at the grocery store, but never paid much attention to. That morning, after another night disturbed by sharp leg cramps, she wandered into her kitchen feeling drained, both in body and spirit. She stood in front of the refrigerator, not quite knowing what she was looking for. Her hands reached past the yogurt, past the orange juice, and hovered over the small bunch of bananas she had bought for her granddaughter's visit last week. She picked one up. It felt light, but solid, reliable, like something from a simpler time. She peeled it slowly, sat by the window, and took a bite. The sweetness surprised her. Soft, smooth, familiar. And for the first time in weeks, something inside her shifted, not just physically, but emotionally. It reminded her of a time when food was comfort. Not calculated, not medical, just good. She didn't know it yet, but that small act would become the beginning of everything. Later that day, she searched online. Foods that help with leg cramps at night? The word popped up again and again, potassium. And there it was, bananas, top of every list. Potassium, she learned, wasn't just a buzzword from her youth or something athletes guzzled after running marathons. It was a key mineral in regulating muscle contractions and nerve signals. And as it turned out, low potassium levels were one of the leading causes of painful leg cramps, especially at night. Her heart sank as she read, "Seniors are especially at risk due to age, muscle loss, and electrolyte imbalance." It was as if the article had been written just for her. Helen leaned back in her chair, holding her empty teacup. She didn't need more pills. She needed more potassium. She needed more bananas. That week, Helen made a quiet shift in her routine. She started each day with a banana, sliced over her oatmeal or blended into a smoothie with a bit of Greek yogurt and a touch of cinnamon. She kept small bananas on hand, not too ripe, not too green, easy on her blood sugar, gentle on her stomach. She also remembered something her late husband, Thomas, used to say. Bananas are brain food and leg fuel. He had eaten one every morning before his long walks. Maybe he had known something all along. But bananas weren't the only potassium-rich food on the list. 2 days later, as she walked slowly down the produce aisle at the local farmer's market, a familiar reddish-orange glow caught her eye. Sweet potatoes. They sat in a wooden crate, earthy and humble. Helen reached for one and smiled. Sweet potatoes had been a staple on her mother's table, roasted with rosemary, mashed with a touch of nutmeg, sometimes even baked into pies during the holidays. She hadn't cooked one in years. That night, she baked a medium sweet potato, skin on, with just a drizzle of olive oil and a pinch of sea salt. The smell filled her kitchen with warmth and nostalgia. She took her first bite. Soft, sweet, satisfying. And her body welcomed it like a long-lost friend. The numbers spoke for themselves. One medium banana, about 422 mgs of potassium. One medium baked sweet potato, over 540 milligrams of potassium. He was giving her body the minerals it had been quietly begging for. But something even more powerful was happening. She wasn't just eating to prevent pain. She was eating to reconnect with herself, with her past, with her strength. Within a week, Helen noticed something strange. Her cramps were changing. They didn't vanish completely, but they became less violent, less sudden. The stabbing jolts in the night turned into gentle warnings, like whispers rather than screams. She could stretch and ease back into sleep. More importantly, she could walk longer during the day. Her steps were less hesitant, her ankles less stiff. She no longer gripped the stair railing with silent dread. She began going for short walks again, at first around her block, and then through the park she once loved. She wasn't healed yet, but she was healing. At her next check-in, her doctor raised his eyebrows as he flipped through her blood work. "Your potassium levels are looking good," he said. "Have you changed anything?" Helen smiled. "Bananas and sweet potatoes." He chuckled. "The original medicine cabinet. Keep it up." Back home, Helen stood in front of her full-length mirror for the first time in months. She looked at her legs. Legs that had once danced at weddings, climbed hiking trails, carried groceries for her family. For too long, she had seen them as weak, untrustworthy. But now, she saw something else. Resilience. She gently rubbed her calves with lavender oil and whispered softly, "Thank you for carrying me this far. I'm finally listening now." Helen's breakfast became a quiet ceremony. She would slice her banana just right, pair it with a piece of toasted whole grain bread and sometimes a spoonful of almond butter. A few times a week, she'd bake a small sweet potato and enjoy it with a sprinkle of cinnamon and crushed walnuts. No rushing, no guilt. Just food as fuel, food as kindness, food as a bridge between what had been lost and what was still possible. And one afternoon, while watching the sunset from her porch, Helen thought, if this is what one banana and a sweet potato can do, what else is waiting for me? Chapter 2. The Gift of Magnesium. Helen's progress with potassium brought hope, but not full relief. The cramps had eased, but not disappeared. Some nights a dull ache still crept into her calves, like a distant storm cloud returning. She knew her journey wasn't over. One afternoon, while visiting her neighbor Nora, the conversation turned, as it often did, to health. "You ever try magnesium?" Nora asked, pouring tea. Helen looked up. "I thought that was in vitamins." "It is," Nora said, "but you can eat it too. Spinach, almonds, cashews. I've had fewer cramps since adding those in. My doctor swears by it." That night, Helen opened her laptop and searched magnesium and muscle cramps in seniors. She learned that magnesium played a key role in muscle relaxation and nerve stability. A deficiency could cause overactive muscle signals, cramps, spasms, tingling. And older adults, frequently deficient. The next morning, she bought a large bag of spinach. It was soft, dark green, and slightly bitter, a flavor she had once disliked. But she sautéed it lightly with garlic and olive oil, then served it with eggs and toast. To her surprise, it was delicious, and it became a habit. For lunch, she added spinach to soup. For dinner, she tossed it into pasta or stirred it into rice. Then came the nuts. Instead of cookies, she kept a jar of raw almonds and cashews by her chair. A small handful became her mid-afternoon snack, crunchy, satisfying, and, most importantly, calming. Within a week, she felt lighter. The cramps no longer startled her at night. Her muscles felt less tense. Her mood even improved. Magnesium, she discovered, supported not just the body, but the mind. She hadn't realized how tightly wound she'd been. And now, With each spoonful of greens, or each quiet crunch of almonds, she felt something loosening, a tension she didn't know she was carrying. One evening, Helen made a spinach and almond salad with a light vinaigrette. As she sat down, she whispered, "This is what healing tastes like." Not flashy, not instant, but real. Chapter 3. Stronger Bones, Calmer Legs. One chilly evening, Helen was stirring her tea when a sharp twinge ran down her right leg. Not quite a cramp, more like a whisper of warning. It disappeared quickly, but it left her uneasy. She had been so careful: bananas, sweet potatoes, spinach, nuts. Still, something was missing. The next morning, while reading her favorite senior wellness blog, she stumbled upon an article titled, "Are you getting enough calcium after 70?" She paused. Calcium. She hadn't thought about that in years, maybe since menopause. The article explained how calcium wasn't just for bones. It helped muscles contract properly. Without enough calcium, nerves could misfire and muscles might seize up, especially at night. It was also essential for preventing falls, maintaining balance, and supporting long-term mobility. Helen leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly. She had cut out most dairy after turning 60, convinced it was harder to digest, but now, maybe it was time to reconsider. That afternoon, she poured herself a small glass of warm milk before bed, just like her mother used to do when she was a child. It was comforting, familiar. And that night, for the first time in a long while, she didn't wake up with leg pain. The next day, she added Greek yogurt to her breakfast, thick, creamy, and satisfying. She topped it with sliced banana and crushed almonds, creating what she now called her calm bowl. At the grocery store, she picked up a block of soft tofu, unsure how to cook it. Her daughter Emily came to visit that weekend and showed her how to pan-sear it with ginger and soy sauce. They cooked together, laughed like they hadn't in months, and shared a meal that felt nourishing in every way. "Mom," Emily smiled, "you're glowing." Helen beamed. "I think I'm finally learning how to take care of myself again." She also tried soy milk, vanilla-flavored, calcium-fortified. It made her feel light, not bloated like she had feared. What surprised her most wasn't just how her body responded, but how her spirit lifted. She felt more anchored, more stable, as if her legs weren't just freer from cramps, but more hers again. Calmer. At her next checkup, her doctor noted improved muscle tone and posture. "You've found your rhythm," he said. Helen nodded, one spoonful of yogurt at a time. That evening, as she sipped her milk and watched the sun set behind the trees, Helen whispered, "I never thought healing could feel this peaceful." But it did. Chapter 4. Hydration is Healing. It was a hot afternoon in July when Helen first realized she hadn't been drinking enough water. She'd been out tending to her small garden, pulling weeds, checking the tomatoes, when a sharp cramp shot up the side of her calf. She grabbed the fence for balance and took a deep breath, waiting for it to pass. Back inside, she sat down and realized something troubling. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had a glass of water. Tea in the morning, milk at night, maybe a few sips here and there, but water, not much. She reached for a glass, filled it, and drank it all in one go. And as it cooled her throat and settled in her belly, something clicked. Maybe the cramps weren't just about minerals. Maybe they were also about moisture. That evening, Helen called her neighbor, Nora, the one who'd told her about magnesium. "Do you drink coconut water?" Nora asked immediately. "It saved me this summer. I used to cramp every time the heat hit." Helen had never been a fan of coconut, but the next morning she bought a small bottle, unsweetened, plain. She poured it over ice and took a sip. Refreshing, slightly sweet, not overwhelming, and deeply soothing. She drank it slowly, letting it settle into her system like medicine. That night, for the first time in weeks, her legs didn't twitch once. She read more. Coconut water was full of electrolytes, potassium, magnesium, sodium, and calcium, all working together to regulate nerve signals and prevent cramping. Even better, it was natural. No added sugar, no artificial coloring, just what her body needed. It became part of her routine, half a glass in the afternoon, another before bed. But the biggest surprise came one Saturday at the local farmer's market. Under a striped tent, she saw a stall piled high with watermelons, round, bright, glistening in the sun. She hadn't had watermelon in years. On a whim, she bought one and carried it home, heavy in her arms but light in her heart. That afternoon she sliced it open, ruby red dripping with juice. She took a bite and felt instant joy. Hydration, sweetness, and comfort, all in one mouthful. It reminded her of childhood picnics, sticky hands, and warm sun on her back. Watermelon, she later learned, wasn't just water. It was rich in potassium and magnesium, gentle on the stomach, and ideal for keeping the body cool and the muscles calm. Helen began keeping a bowl of chilled watermelon in her fridge. It became her go-to snack on hot days, her sweet relief, as she called it. She shared it with neighbors, with Emily, and once even brought it to church potluck, where it disappeared within minutes. The impact on her body was undeniable. Her legs felt more limber, her skin looked brighter, even her sleep improved. Hydration, she realized, wasn't just about avoiding thirst. It was about giving her cells the fluid they needed to function, repair, and relax. One evening, after a gentle walk in the park, Helen sat on a bench with her thermos of chilled coconut water. A breeze rustled the trees. She stretched her legs forward and smiled. They didn't ache. They didn't cramp. They simply were. And for Helen, that was everything. Chapter 5. Walking Free. Helen hadn't realized how long it had been since she walked without fear. Fear of cramping, fear of falling, fear that her legs might give out halfway through a grocery aisle or during a simple stroll through the park. But on a crisp Sunday morning in early fall, she stepped outside, scarf around her neck, and headed toward the lake. No cane, no pain. Just her. The trail was quiet, scattered with golden leaves. Her steps were steady, her heart calm. Each movement felt effortless, her calves light, her knees strong. The body that had once betrayed her now carried her gently forward. And for the first time in over a year, she felt free. She thought back to where she had started, waking in the night, clutching her legs, helpless and tired. And now she had bananas and sweet potatoes on her counter, spinach in her fridge, tofu marinating for dinner, coconut water chilling, a bowl of watermelon waiting by the sink. Her home had become her healing. She didn't need medications she couldn't pronounce or creams that only masked the pain. She had listened to her body, she had nourished it, and in return, it had forgiven her. A week later, Helen hosted her small book club at her house. But instead of pastries and punch, she served Greek yogurt with almonds and berries, chilled coconut water with lime, and warm roasted sweet potato bites sprinkled with cinnamon. The women laughed and chatted, but when the topic turned to H's and aging, Helen shared her story, not as advice, but as hope. "I thought my legs were failing," she said, "but really, I just stopped giving them what they needed. Once I started feeding them right, they remembered how to be strong." There was silence, then nods, then questions. One by one, they began to ask about spinach, about tofu, about yogurt, about possibility. That night, Helen sat alone on her porch, listening to the cicadas hum their end-of-summer songs. She rubbed lavender oil into her calves, no longer in pain, but in gratitude. She whispered, "Thank you," into the darkness. And she meant it. Conclusion and closing message. Dear friends, if you've made it to this point in the story, thank you. You've walked beside Helen through her fears, her discoveries, and her transformation. And maybe in her journey, you've recognized a little of your own. Leg cramps in our golden years are not just discomfort, they are messages. Messages from our bodies, asking for care, for hydration, for nourishment. Sometimes healing doesn't come in a pill. Sometimes it begins with something as small as a banana, a handful of almonds, a glass of water, a little kindness to yourself. So here's to you, wherever you are on your path. May your steps be steady, your sleep be peaceful, and your heart stay curious. You are never too old to feel better. If this story touched you, helped you, or reminded you of someone you love, please leave us a comment below. We would love to hear your thoughts, your experiences, and how you're caring for yourself. Let us know which foods have helped you feel stronger. What will you try first? Hence, Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next story that could change your life. Thank you for watching, take care of your beautiful body, and we'll see you again in the next video.